ABC. It's Dave here. Hope everybody's staying safe. So to come on here and show some new finds and talk about a video I found on YouTube that maybe somebody else may enjoy, so I thought I'd include it. But there was a record show back at the beginning of March. It was really about the time that all this coronavirus stuff began, and I really didn't know that much about it until that Friday, which I think was that Friday the 13th? It may have been. But I'd gone downtown to the library, and because they had a one of their book sales, and sometimes they'll have media in there too, like they'll be selling CDs and movies and stuff like that, you know, and art books and what have you, all at a pretty good price. And I usually go by there just to check and see if they have anything new or whatever that I'm interested in. And I noticed that Friday it seemed like the town was vacant. Now, I don't take a newspaper here because it's, I kind of consider it a waste of money. But the town seemed pretty vacant, and I hadn't listened to the regular news that day. And I went into the library, and again, for them having a sale, generally it's pretty crowded, and everything seemed to be kind of vacant, or not very many people had showed up. And then I walked up to the door, and they had a note on the door that said what was going on. And I went ahead and walked inside, and there's usually a guard on the entrance, and he said that he'd been called off and what have you, and a lot of everything had already been set out and everything, and I could see some of the library staff was starting to box it all back up again and put it up, which I'm sure probably frustrated them to no end, but that's the way it goes, I guess. At any rate, so I didn't go there, but that Saturday they had a small record show here, and I went to it. And although it wasn't a big sale by any means, it kind of looked like most of it was, dealers from around the area. But there's usually a friend of mine that sells stuff, and he usually has good prices, so I went ahead and went to it. And really didn't find a lot, but I found one or two things, and then the rest of the stuff I picked up a couple, one thing off of eBay, and some stuff out of thrift stores. But anyway, I found this at one of my friend's stalls there at the book sale. This is Paul Winter Sextet, and Jazz Meets the Bossa Nova. This was actually sealed when I bought it, which was kind of surprising to me. I like the cover showing, the landscape and what have you down there. Brazil, I guess, and Rio de Janeiro. But I have one other Paul Winters album. It's one of his later ones. This one is really early. This is the second album he ever made. The first one that he made, and this was, I think, 63 or something like that, but he was discovered at Northwestern University there in Chicago by Dizzy Gillespie. And he did that first album, and these early albums like this, from what I read online, was some of the earliest jazz albums to fuse bossa nova and that type stuff, samba, stuff like that with jazz. So I was happy to pick it up, particularly being sealed and everything. Now, I've already played this, and it's a good enough album. I thought it could have been, it seemed like the pressing of it was a little odd, but I've got two stereos in my house. I'll play it on the other one to see what I think about it. And I don't recommend it highly, but it's okay for what it is. I picked up this one too, since McCoy Tyner had passed away here recently. Looking Out. It's on the Columbia label. This is one of his later albums, 1982, and he plays with some kind of almost a little bit fusiony. Is the way I would describe this. But he plays with some other musicians as well. And this isn't anywhere near his, as good as his earlier output. It's an okay album too. Not as recommendable as his earlier stuff. But like I said, it's kind of more a tad bit fusiony. And there's some singing on it as well by Phyllis Hyman, which is this lady here. And there's some other musicians on here like Stanley Clarke plays the bass, Carlos Santana on guitar, Gary Bartz, who has played with the ECM label, plays alto sax. And there's just some other people on here that kind of round out the album. Kind of more mellow, really. Here's a picture of McCoy Tyner with Santana and Jimi Hendrix right here, although Hendrix isn't on the album. But overall, pretty good album. I've only heard it once, but like I said, I would recommend some of his earlier albums over that one. Then I found this down at Half Price Books here in town. This is Paul Horn's Inside the Great Pyramid. Always wanted this album. I have one other album by Paul Horn. Some might classify this as New Age, I don't know. But what he does, really all it is just kind of free, improvised jazz. And he's done albums at the Taj Mahal and various other albums. And I don't have the one at Taj Mahal, but I've got another one by him. And sometimes he'll use the one that I have. He plays against whales, singing songs in the ocean, what have you, along with there's some other stuff on that album. But I was always really curious about this one here. It's a 2-record set and pretty good. So if you're into that sort of free improvisation thing, then it's a pretty good one for that, and also for mellowing out. I have this one here. Thought I'd mention it. Bucky Pizzarelli, Scott here's guitarist, and he passed away here the other day. This is John Bunch, who plays piano, and it's they're the two main players. Actually, it's a quartet album with bass and drums. But Bucky Pizzarelli used to play out there in West Texas, where I was from, out in the Odessa Midland area. And used to have a friend that played upright bass, double bass, and would sit in. I imagine what they did was, they'd have select stars come and play at the Jazz Society, and they'd get locals also to round out the sound of the band at times. But it's a real mellow album if you're into like jazz guitar and piano. This has some classics on it by Ellington, like In a Sentimental Mood, Jitterbug Waltz by Fats Waller. There's another Ellington, Do Nothing Till You Hear From Me, Lady Be Good by George Gershwin. But I could easily see having some more albums that Bucky Pizzarelli's on, and his son also plays a guitar as well. I forget his name off the top of my head, but nice album. I found this at Half Price Books. They had a little coupon that you could take in. I think it was 40% off, and it wasn't that much. It didn't cost that much to begin with. But this is a series of compilation albums. It's a French album, and it's a electroacoustic album, which kind of sort of like musical concrete in some ways, or concrete, however you want to pronounce it. It has various artists on here, and it ranges everything from a flute to piano. There's even some singing on here, and various things like that. And you know, they'll add in some kind of electronic type sounds and whatnot to it. It's a 2 CD set. This is on the Harmonia Mundi album, recorded in France. Like I said, it's a series of CDs that they did. This is the second part in the set, but I think there's, I don't know, 3 or 4 different CDs like this that are comps. And it's kind of more avant-garde. It's not going to be something I, would listen to all the time, that's for sure. This kind of comes off to me more as like classical, in a way that's got these textures and stuff in it. I'd almost rather just hear it, straight ahead classical or whatever, but it was okay for what I paid in it. I kept looking at it in the store and was like, what is this? And decided to pick it up. This is one that I found online. eBay, I think. This is Czar. I believe they're a Belgium or French band. And quartet. One guy plays guitar, one plays bass, percussion, and one guy plays hurdy-gurdy, which is one of those old instruments that you turn the crank and it makes a sound. I think it plucks strings or something like that, but I haven't really researched that thing. But one of the guys plays a hurdy-gurdy, and it's on the Cuneiform label, which is one of the reasons that I picked it up. And it's pretty interesting. Mostly it's got 2 long songs on it. The first song here is 19 minutes, 20 minutes long, and then there's a couple of shorter cuts, and then another 17-minute song, and then like some 4-minute songs and 3-minute songs. But it's kind of progressive, or it is progressive, sort of progressive jazz, progressive classical, all that stuff kind of mixed in together. But yeah, a fairly interesting album. I really like it. I've got this online too. I think I've got 2 or 3 albums by this group here, Mendisky, Martin, and Wood trio, and kind of organ-based, or they are a organ-based trio. Sort of an update on the Jimmy Smith type stuff. This is a live album, Friday Afternoon in the Universe, and I've only heard this a couple of times. They did an album with John Scofield that I have that's really I prefer over this one. This is one of the earlier albums, but it's still pretty nice. Sort of a progressive jazz, like I said, that's organ based on the Gramavision label. I picked this up at one of the flea markets, or whatever you want to call it, thrift stores around here. This is Carol Nathan, N-E-T-H-E-N, A View from a Bridge, and it's on the I think the Narada Mystique label. She plays keyboards and synthesizers and all that type thing, and yeah, pretty nice, sort of mellow, but a lot of textures with her keyboards and synthesizers, and sort of matches the cover in some ways. But yeah, if you're into synthesizers and that type of thing, you'd probably like it as well. Pretty good way to relax and unwind. I know Junior over at Cosmic Grandma had a post going for a while about ways to relax and whatever. And generally, this is the way this type of stuff I listen to. I thought of something, with lyrics and everything, but really I listen to this, and really even then, here on our TV stations they have several music channels, and one of them is called oh golly, I can't remember the name of it, I don't guess, but it's sort of a new age type channel. Sometimes I'll just put that on and listen to it, and it's real easy to get lost in it. But yeah, a View from a Bridge, pretty nice album. I found this 2 CD set by Lyle Lovett, and what he does here is cover various singer-songwriter, folk type guys' music. He's got some music on here by various people. He's got one on here by Guy Clark. That's a picture of him. It also came with this nice booklet with the song lyrics in it. Here's one with Vince Bell. I have a few albums by him. Vince Bell. There's a update picture of Willis Allen Ramsey right here with Lovett. Willis Allen only put out that one album on the Shelter Records. Although I have one other thing that I recorded off of, that he did some new songs on this show. It's out of I think Carolina, I don't know, North or South Carolina, which I think is still ongoing, called Mountain Stage, and he played some new material on there, but so far has not released anything new. And he also does a song about Murphy, Michael Martin Murphy, right there, and several other songwriters. Now he doesn't do duets with them or anything, but there's one on here by Steve Fromholtz, Townes Van Zandt. He does Flying Shoes by him, and various other musicians. And if you like singer-songwriter stuff, and that kind of sounds like it might appeal to you, you'd probably like it as well. Then it's going to talk about, I saw a video here the other day. You know how things, you'd be watching YouTube and something will pop up, and I clicked on it. It was about various musicians that were in the psychedelic movement, and the guy had done short videos on them. I found it to be pretty interesting. He had, I think, 6 of them up. I think there's 5 now. And it kind of looked like he'd done one on Peter Green that was in the early version of Fleetwood Mac, although he had to take that down for whatever reason. But he's done them on, he did one on Rocky Erickson, and mentioned his documentary that that was made on him sometimes back. Rocky had a documentary done, You're Gonna Miss Me, which is really good. I mean, if you haven't seen it. And here's one that he did. I've seen just about all of them, I think, except for the first one, which is on Sid, oh golly, the guy in Pink Floyd, Sid Barrett. I haven't seen that one yet, although I imagine it's good too. But he did one on Alexander Spence, or Skip Spence, who was in Jefferson Airplane and Moby Grape. And I've had this CD for a long time, which is on Sundazed. And one of the reasons to get, say, a CD over the vinyl version is you get all these extra tracks down through here. But I was never really a big fan of this album when I bought it, and I would put it on, and it kind of, the appeal of it kind of eluded me. And I knew it had some sort of like critical, praise, and the critics kind of liked it, but it never did hit home with me until I saw his videos about him, and I thought I'd pull it out and spin it some more. And actually, I do like it. The thing of it is that these are really underproduced. It's just Skip Spence playing guitar, bass, drums, and singing on his own. And as you know, Skip Spence played in Moby Grape. Like I think this is I actually have Truly Fine Citizen as well, but this is the last Grape album that I kept. And people have shown this one. I still have their live album. And I even have an album by Bob Mosley, which played bass with the Moby Grape. But and it's a pretty good album. It's kind of folky. It's not anything like the Moby Grape per se. But if you like the Moby Grape, if you run across this one in record hunting, you might want to pick it up. It's pretty decent. It's kind of singer-songwriter-y, folky. But like I said, this one here kind of always eluded me. But I do like it. It's kind of like supposedly when he got out of his stint in the mental hospital, he started doing drugs, like a lot of people did back in those times, and was kind of seduced by the whole movement, better living through chemistry and all that stuff. But he had a mental break, had mental problems, and had to go in the hospital, mental hospital several times, was thrown in jail. And the last time he got out of the hospital in New York, he got on his motorcycle and drove down to Nashville and recorded this and released this album. And then after he got through getting everything on tape, he jumped back on his motorcycle and drove into the sunset, because this is the last thing that he recorded. And I think I read online it was either him or somebody else. He kind of got his life together a little bit and married a lady in Switzerland and lived out the rest of his life in Switzerland. I think that's what I read, although I might be mistaken about that. But as far as this album, it's not terribly psychedelic. It's more, folk. I mean, there's various styles on it. Now, like the Moby Grape, it is kind of like the Moby Grape, and like there's all kind of styles on here. There's blues, there's some country songs, country rock songs. There's a song in here in 3/4 time, and maybe a little bit of a psychedelic song at the beginning of it. But yeah, overall, I would recommend it, but just bear in mind that it's not anything like the first two Moby Grape albums. It's not really rocking at all. Be prepared for something that's totally stripped down. But if you're prepared for that, then it's a pretty good album. I have some psychedelic albums, but the reason I've never really showed them is because everybody in the world has already shown, everything I own, from Quicksilver to Grateful Dead and oh golly, Fever Tree, and United States of America and all those others. The only thing I have that hasn't been shown is this album here, and it was kind of for me for a long time it was a holy grail. This is a Mad River's Paradise Bar and Grill, and the critics always favored this album over this one here. This is their first debut album, and I always did favor this album, and I still do, because it kind of sounds like the Grateful Dead in some ways, the way they play their guitars and sing on this album, the way the songs are constructed. Now the critics always liked this one, but and the reason I was always really curious in it because it has Richard Brodigan, which used to be kind of a, well, he was a writer, sort of a hippie writer way back when, and a hippie poet. Wrote short stories and short novels too. He recites some of his poetry on here, but I kind of think where he does that, it kind of stops the flow of the music a little bit or whatever. So always preferred the earlier one actually, but I haven't ever seen anybody show this one, so I thought I'd show it. Now there were a couple other videos that that guy that made those videos that were interesting. One was on a guy named Vince Taylor, who is a British guy. He was born in the UK, went to America, came back a little bit before my time, but he was kind of a crooner in the style of somebody like you know, Elvis Presley, very much so. He dressed all in black, and you know, had kind of a rockabilly band behind him, and except he was, you know, more kind of pushed the envelope a little bit. He'd fall down on the ground and, you know, throw the mic stand up in the air, and this guy's videos, what he called his small series of videos, he called them acid casualties, and it's just musicians that got in too deep with their drug abuse and had a mental break, either had to go into a mental hospital like Sid Barrett, or you know, Skip Spence and what have you. Same thing with this Vince Taylor guy, although I found him pretty interesting because I wasn't aware of him, but you know, some of his antics kind of reminded me of oh golly, that guy that was the lead singer for the Cramps. This is Lux Interior, I think is his name. But there again, Lux Interior pushed the envelope even further from this guy. But it was fairly interesting. I'll leave a link to that. Fairly interesting video. And the other video was from a guy named Craig Smith, who was in a sort of psychedelic pop band called the Penny Arcade, who I wasn't real familiar with. But Craig Smith got very popular. He was a songwriter, got real popular, was on the Andy Williams show, and in fact Andy Williams even recorded one of his songs for his Christmas album, and was on the Andy Williams show for a while, along with this, you know, these other backup singers that would sing with Andy Williams. And he even had one of his songs, Hey Salesman or Salesman, that was done by the Monkees. They did one of his songs. Somebody else, Glenn Campbell, did one of his songs. And so he had, you know, he had a pretty good, you know, he had some royalty checks coming in and everything, and went abroad over into the Middle East at the time, and went on this supposedly this trek called the Hippie Trail, which actually was a trail that was you know, something that I guess a lot of your hippies